On November 1, 2025, the calm Caribbean Sea, long a symbol of tranquility and natural beauty, erupted in sudden, unexpected violence. In a dramatic show of force, a U.S. military strike targeted and destroyed a suspected drug-smuggling vessel operating in international waters, far from any coastline or port. The attack was swift and decisive, leaving all 3 men on board dead. No American personnel were harmed in the operation, which unfolded in a matter of minutes and left little trace of the vessel's illicit mission. U.S. officials have so far withheld key details about the vessel's identity and the backgrounds of those killed, citing ongoing investigations. This secrecy has only fueled speculation, raising questions among journalists, foreign governments, and human rights organizations. This was not an isolated incident. In recent months, the U.S. military has stepped up its presence in the Caribbean, launching a series of operations against suspected criminal networks operating far from any declared war zone. The strike marks a dramatic shift in U.S. policy, one where lethal force is now being used against alleged narco-terrorists without trial, formal charges, or any semblance of due process. Critics warn this could set a dangerous precedent for future military actions. Human rights advocates and legal experts have condemned the operation as an extrajudicial killing, arguing that it violates international law. Meanwhile, U.S. officials insist that national security and the fight against transnational crime justify such extraordinary measures. The event has ignited a fierce global debate about the legality and morality of using military power in international waters, with world leaders and diplomats calling for greater transparency and accountability. As the world watches closely, urgent questions mount about the future of international law, the boundaries of state power, and the potential consequences of this new era of military intervention on the high seas. The Trump administration quickly justified the strike, labeling the targets as narco-terrorists. Officials argued that these groups were not just criminal organizations, but sophisticated networks that threatened the stability and security of the United States. By using the term narco-terrorism, the administration sought to elevate the threat level in the eyes of the public and policymakers alike. They invoked the language of war, describing the fight against drug cartels as a battle that required military precision and force. This marked a significant shift from previous strategies, which had largely relied on law enforcement and intelligence operations. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth declared these groups a direct threat to American lives, equating them with notorious terrorist organizations like Al-Qaeda and ISIS. He emphasized that the cartel's tactics, violence, intimidation, and cross-border operations mirrored those of global terror networks. By designating cartels as terrorist organizations, the U.S. has shifted the fight from law enforcement to military conflict. This reclassification allows for a broader range of tactics, including the use of special operations forces and advanced surveillance technologies. Hegseth vowed to hunt down these groups globally, framing the campaign as a defense of American security and a necessary response to an evolving threat. He promised that the U.S. would pursue cartel leaders wherever they operated, regardless of borders. The administration claims a classified legal opinion supports this approach, arguing that cartels are akin to hostile armies operating within and beyond U.S. borders. This legal framework, officials say, provides the authority to take unprecedented action. This legal rationale allows the U.S. to bypass traditional arrest and trial procedures, treating suspects as enemy combatants. In practice, this means suspects can be detained indefinitely, interrogated by military personnel, and even tried in military tribunals. President Trump has championed this aggressive stance, calling the drug trade an invasion that must be stopped by force. He has repeatedly argued that only a show of overwhelming strength can deter the cartels and protect American communities from the scourge of drugs. The official message is clear: the U.S. is at war with narco-terrorism, and the old rules no longer apply. This new doctrine has sparked debate both at home and abroad, raising questions about the balance between security and civil liberties. International waters, including the Caribbean, are now considered legitimate battlegrounds in this new conflict. The U.S. military has expanded its presence, intercepting vessels and launching operations far from American shores, signaling a new era in the fight against global drug trafficking. President Trump's policy marks a sharp turn in America's approach to the drug trade. He sees drug smuggling as a direct attack on U.S. sovereignty, demanding a military response. Unlike previous administrations, Trump has authorized lethal force, not just surveillance or support, By designating cartels as terrorist organizations, the Pentagon now targets cartel members as enemies, not suspects. This doctrine, championed by Defense Secretary Hegseth, treats cartels as paramilitary threats. The U.S. has deployed warships, fighter jets, and even an aircraft carrier to the Caribbean, escalating the conflict. This bold strategy combines military strikes with political pressure on foreign leaders, but it carries serious diplomatic and legal risks. The November 1st strike is just one in a series of at least 15 U.S. military attacks on suspected smuggling vessels since September 2025. These operations are part of a rapidly expanding campaign, with U.S. forces targeting boats believed to be involved in narcotics trafficking and organized crime. The frequency and intensity of these missions have increased dramatically, signaling a shift in U.S. military engagement in the region. These operations, spanning the Caribbean and Pacific, have killed at least 64 people labeled as narco-terrorists, none charged or tried. The lack of due process has raised serious questions about the legality and morality of these actions. Families of those killed are left without answers, and human rights organizations have begun to voice their concerns. The campaign has grown in scale and complexity, with coordinated strikes and advanced weaponry. U.S. military planners now employ real-time intelligence, satellite tracking, and joint task forces to identify and neutralize targets, often within hours of detection. U.S. forces now patrol the region with destroyers, F-35s, and even a nuclear submarine. The presence of such advanced assets underscores the seriousness with which the U.S. views this new front in the war on drugs, and the willingness to deploy overwhelming force. The USS Gerald R. Ford carrier group is en route, signaling a readiness to intensify operations. Its arrival will mark the largest U.S. naval deployment in the Caribbean in decades, further escalating tensions in the region and drawing international attention. Each strike reinforces the Pentagon's strategy, but the rising death toll and military buildup alarm the world. Critics argue that these actions risk destabilizing the region and could provoke unintended consequences, including retaliation or escalation by criminal networks. The U.S. is setting a new precedent, using overwhelming force against criminal suspects in international waters. This approach challenges long-standing norms about the use of military power and the rights of those accused of crimes. For many, this escalation blurs the line between law enforcement and warfare. The distinction between policing and military action is becoming increasingly difficult to define, leaving civilians and governments alike uncertain about the future. The world is left to grapple with the consequences of this new doctrine, as leaders debate how to respond to a campaign that is reshaping the rules of engagement on the high seas. The legality of these strikes is hotly contested. International law typically restricts military force outside declared conflicts, especially in international waters. Critics say the U.S. is exploiting a legal loophole by labeling drug cartels as terrorists, bypassing due process. The law of armed conflict is meant for wars, not criminal enterprises, making this interpretation highly controversial. Strikes near or inside other nations' waters risk violating sovereignty and established legal frameworks. The Trump administration's refusal to release its legal justification only deepens suspicion. Many fear the U.S. is operating outside the boundaries of international law, undermining global norms. The United Nations has condemned the U.S. strikes, calling them potential extrajudicial killings. UN High Commissioner for Human Rights Volker Turk demanded an immediate halt and independent investigations. Human rights law insists on the right to life and fair trial, even for those accused of serious crimes. Groups like Amnesty International warn that these actions set a dangerous precedent for global law enforcement. The risk of mistaken identity and lack of accountability is high, especially with secret intelligence and legal justifications. The U.S. has provided no public evidence that those killed were truly cartel members or posed imminent threats. Human rights advocates argue that transparency and oversight are essential for lawful use of force. Without them, the risk of abuse and erosion of human rights grows. The U.S. campaign has sparked outrage across Latin America, especially in Venezuela. President Maduro accuses the U.S. of using the drug war as cover for regime change, putting his military on alert. The U.S. designation of the Cartel de los Soles as a terrorist group directly implicates Venezuelan officials, escalating tensions. Other regional leaders, including Colombia's president, have condemned the strikes as murder, revealing a rift with Washington. Many fear that unilateral U.S. action will fuel more violence and instability, undermining regional cooperation. The aggressive approach risks alienating key partners and damaging long-standing alliances. Latin American governments now face a dilemma: accept U.S. military operations or openly oppose a powerful neighbor. This tension threatens to derail coordinated efforts against drug trafficking. Global powers have voiced concern over the U.S. campaign. Russia condemned the strikes as excessive and accused Washington of ignoring international law. European allies, though less vocal, are uneasy about the U.S. bypassing multilateral solutions and UN mandates. There's growing fear that this precedent could destabilize the international system and embolden other nations to act unilaterally. At home, bipartisan critics in Congress demand transparency and oversight, warning of unchecked executive power. The administration's refusal to share its legal rationale has sparked a constitutional debate over war powers. Domestic dissent weakens the U.S. position abroad and amplifies international criticism. Even within America, there's deep uncertainty about the wisdom and legality of this new war on drugs. As the strikes continue, urgent questions remain. Is it legal to kill criminal suspects in international waters without trial? The U.S. says yes. The UN and many experts say no. The lack of public evidence about those killed undermines trust and legitimacy. With more military assets arriving, the risk of escalation, possibly even direct conflict with Venezuela, grows. The world watches anxiously, fearing a wider crisis. The U.S. campaign prioritizes force over due process, raising alarms about the erosion of international law. Critics warn this strategy could destabilize global norms and increase violence. The future is uncertain, but the controversy unleashed in the Caribbean is far from over.